George Clooney and Brad Pitt's new movie, Wolves, is on Apple TV Plus September 27th.
That's where I want you to be now.
So if you want to see George Clooney and Brad Pitt, go to Apple TV Plus.
You got to start the story there.
Or if you want to see Brad Pitt and George Clooney, go to Apple TV Plus.
I am enjoying the show.
And if you want to see their new movie, Wolves,
You can't do it, I'm going to help you out. I can do it, so do it.
definitely go to Apple TV Plus.
Admit it is cool. Okay, fine, it was very cool.
Wolves, streaming September 27th on Apple TV Plus. Rated R.
Ampire. Hey babies, hey babies, hey babies. Hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone. Happy game day. Commanders-Bengals tonight. I'm in Cincinnati, getting set for the call with Logan Paulson tonight as we get set for Commanders and Bengals. 1-1 Washington off their win against the Giants. 0-2 Cincinnati. Lost at home to the Patriots in their home opener. Turned around, went to week 2, played at Arrowhead, lost at the buzzer on a long Harrison Butker field goal. So they come in 0-2, fifth time in 6 years under Zach Taylor, their head coach, that they've actually started 0-2. We know the recent history. Cincinnati has shown resilience, bounced back, and oftentimes has made the playoffs. Not last year after Joe Burrow got hurt. This year does feel a little bit different, obviously. Joe Burrow is perceived to be, I don't know about 100%, but perceived to be healthy, much different than the last couple of years when he had an appendectomy or he had leg injuries and all that type of stuff. This year he's dealing with a wrist, but they're not using that as an excuse this time for the slow start. There was some odd negotiations that went on throughout the offseason. T. Higgins is playing on a franchise tag, didn't get a long-term deal. Jamar Chase wanted to preemptively get a long-term deal, even though he has 2 years left. They didn't get that done. He didn't practice during the summer. So I guess on that front, and Higgins didn't play in either of the first 2 games. If on that front, you could maybe understand the slow start for Cincinnati. We'll see what Washington's defense does here. Obviously, it's going to just take a total team improvement to have a shot to win this evening. They're going to have to get more pressure on Joe Burrow, and obviously the secondary is going to be very much in question as they try to figure out how to stop the combination of Chase and Higgins and the tight end group, which has become prolific for Cincinnati here early, headed by the former Dolphins tight end, Mike Gesicki. All right, all of these topics, including what does Washington do with their stars? Will they emerge? John Allen, Daron Payne, Terry McLaurin. These were all topics that I talked about with John Keim from ESPN and the John Keim Report. We're talking out at practice on a Saturday, getting set to head out to Cincinnati. This is a weird early season Monday night game for this team. They haven't had one at all in a couple of years, an early season showcase game. Interesting. Maybe perception-wise, they like what Jaden Daniels brings to the program, and so the national audience, they want to give him a look at him.
Well, I think it's also why it's early, because you want to get them early where they're still more interesting, right? And I think that's part of it. But yes, get Jaden Daniels on there against Joe Burrow. I always thought, Bram, that the Monday night game, if they had one, would have been against Caleb Williams and the Bears.
Yeah.
But, this makes sense. 2 LSU guys. So the ratings in Louisiana will be off the charts. But get him out there and get this team early before the perception would be that they're not going to be that good. Yep. So get them now while there's still some intrigue with them.
So, this is interesting. 4 years ago, we saw Joe Burrow in his rookie season, and unfortunately didn't end very well because there was an injury in the game against him. In Jaden Daniels' case, not unlike Joe Burrow, it's off to a fast start where it is clearly obvious that he's ahead of the curve. And if you do a comparison to what the other rookie quarterbacks are doing right now around the league, he's clearly ahead of the curve. So what is just your take through 2 games with him?
I think what I like is the poise he plays with and the patience he plays with as well. I think there's a maturity to his game because of that. Now, you can go sit there and go through the plays as we have and say, okay, here, as you progress, you're going to probably make this decision versus this one for a bigger play than what you got over here, right? But that's a progression aspect. That's as you become a more experienced NFL quarterback. But for now, I like that he's taking care of the ball. There are a lot of red zone issues last week, but what we didn't see is him get impatient and force the ball in there. He protected the points with his decision making. That was really good. I think there's still some things in the pocket that he's going to learn about when to escape, when to run, how to keep your eyes upfield. Again, all growth aspects. So I've really been impressed, but I'm not surprised, Bram, because this is what we've seen since he got here. We've seen and heard about the poise and the patience. We've seen it in practice. So the fact that he's showing it now is just, to me, a continuation of what he's shown in practice. practice.
You know, it's funny, like, because the red zone situation a week ago was almost comic that they just could not get something done that was right. I'd like to try to chalk it up. It was just one of those weird days, but I'll get your thoughts on that in a second. But to your point about, like, he's kind of ahead here. So this is 2 weeks in a row that actually in the red zone, he made a really good decision. He checked into the second touchdown run. That wasn't called that way in Tampa Bay. And then last week, after he took a sack and they had a 3rd and 14 on a play in the red zone, he checked into the Austin Eckler run that gave them an opportunity, that gave him a 4th and 1, which was, you know, obviously derailed by another procedural penalty. But, you know, like, it's these things, and the coaches are saying it, like, he's the one making these choices. They're the right choices.
They are. Now, I will say the one in the second touchdown in Tampa, I think they would like to have had him hand off because he got, like, and even Kingsbury said it was one of the worst calls he's had. However, what you have to like and what that shows too is the guy's he's a competitor, and I think that also matters as well. So I think you see that. So I mean, I think they have. Listen, he puts in a lot of work. He's coming here early, and I think that's what separates him from some other young quarterbacks that I've covered is the amount of work early behind the scenes that he puts in to prepare and how he processes all that as well. You know, whether it's with the virtual reality headsets or just getting in here early, getting extra work, extra film study. He feels like he's prepared. And again, there's still stuff. Listen, they could have easily scored. They could have scored 30 points in each of the first 2 games. I don't know about easily, but they could have. It was there for them. So part of the growth process of the offense is they're moving the ball, and there's a lot more that can be done as he and the offense, not just him, but the offense matures.
So I thought Cliff Kingsbury said yesterday, the one that really stood out to me when he did his media availability was, he's executing this better than we could have anticipated, was the way that he put it, which I think is just a easy way of saying, like, not all rookie quarterbacks are the same. You never quite kind of know, but it falls in line with everything we've seen and heard throughout the spring and the summer into the season. He is ahead of where anyone could have anticipated him being.
And again, I go back to the work that he's put in. That's where it stems from, because even in the summertime, Kingsbury echoed that same sentiment that, like, you know, he's really a quick study, and it's like the work he's putting in must be a lot, because you don't become that quick a study just because, oh, I got it. It's only because the work you're doing behind the scenes. And again, he's not a guy who posts stuff on Instagram about, look how hard I'm working. It's a just go get it done because they'll see it on the field. And that's what we're seeing. I think that's why teammates really like him and respect him, is for that reason. It's not just the coaches saying it too. You know, their players are saying this as well. So I think that's what bodes well for him.
What did you think of the red zone last week?
It was bad. Now, I think you can look at it as, okay, how much of it they put themselves in bad situations with the penalties. They had the 4th and 1 where it's like they have momentum and they're running the ball pretty well, and then it's a 4th and 1 and it's in a false start. So, like, that's a a bad mistake, and they had multiple false start penalties. And some of that is, you know, maybe it's crowd noise, and you've got to communicate some of the calls better, louder, whatever. But we saw those same issues in training camp with them too. We'd see that when they go to some hard counts, we'd see the offense always jumping with that. So that's been a problem since the summer. But that to me is what's a big part, because you can't keep putting yourself. You were 2nd and 4, now you're 2nd and 9. Big difference in the red zone. And then there was one time where he could have thrown the ball away to avoid a sack, but we're still talking. It would have been, you know, I think it would have been like 2nd and 8 versus 2nd and 13. So 2nd and long still, but it's a better spot to be in. But that's just one play. The 4 false starts? Those were killers. You can't have, you know, 1 you can live with, 4 is a massive issue. So I think that was a big part of it. And then, you know, I'll be curious to see how the pass game develops. If you get Noah Brown a little bit more involved, maybe another bigger target down there, to go with a Zach Ertz or someone like that. And so I think there's a combination of things, but the penalties, it's hard to accurately gauge because the penalties were killers. And
they were all different too. I mean,
right.
One of them was they tried to get cute with a wildcat, and all of a sudden they snapped the ball too soon. It was 3 different people who got the penalty, so it wasn't the same culprit.
Correct.
And they were all very different plays and alignments where it happened.
Correct, and that's a problem. And so there are other times too where one time Brian Robinson has to run around the left end if, you know, John Bates misses his block, and then Terry McLaurin doesn't hold his block. They tackle Robinson for 2 yards. It should have been a 4-yard gain if they just hold their block or get their block. And so those things, that's an execution issue. Now, other team gets paid, we all know that, but I don't think that these were extraordinarily hard blocks to hold for enough, right? And then there was another time. Now I think this was from the 20s, so technically, red zone, 19 and in, right? But the bobbled snap that Daniels had. Zacchaeus has a wide open lane around the left end. You have two defenders out there, two blockers, and if you juke one guy, you may score. So that was the next down was a sack and they kick a field goal. So there were little things like that, Daniels isn't going to bobble a snap like that again, right?
Yeah.
So I don't blame, that's not a blame thing. That's not anything other than, hey, it happens, So, but the point is, the play and the call were there, and it just was a matter of, there were a couple times where it's just execution. And so, that's when I think you can overcome those mistakes.
I am not, we talked about this a lot during the summer, and just watching how the team got built and what they put together, et cetera, and the profile of the team, for me, them becoming a run-forward team or that becoming their strength is not a surprise to me, whether they intended it or not, that I felt like it was logical that they would start to lean on this. I don't ever really expect 200-yard rush days, which they got, or that to be commonplace, but them to be closer to a 50-50 run team, I don't think would shock me. I think their line is better at run blocking. They have a quarterback who can use his legs. They have two very viable running backs, and their receivers are not beating anybody over the top, and they're physical. So it always felt logical to me that this is the way they would go.
Oh, I agree. And the perception with Kingsbury is air raid, he must throw the ball. Let's say there was a crazy coach who wanted to throw it 70% of the time. That's not Kingsbury. That may have been someone else in the past. It's not him. And
it is funny though, when you bring it up to him, he'll go, "We just want to win by any means necessary," which almost sounds a little begrudgingly. I get it,
But in Arizona, they were top 10 in rush attempts. Now, some of that is Kyler Murray, and some of that here is going to be Jaden Daniels. But it's never been a disproportionate passing attack, because you can't win like that in the NFL unless you have certain personnel. And they do not. And so I think, I'm not surprised at all. I've always felt like that's what it was going to be. What I also like, Bram, is the diversity of the rush attack. They can run different sort of blocking schemes. They'll run a lot of gap and power, and they'll run some zones, etc. But I also like sometimes the alignments. And sometimes, one of the things that I've seen with the Bengals is that if you can, the Chiefs did a really good job with alignment and motion and all that, with creating good lanes for Pacheco in their run game. And I think these guys can do that as well. And there was a play last week, the 4th down and 1 play. They really opened a hole for Robinson in a very tough situation, because they had Eckler and Robinson in the game at the same time. Eckler runs to the left. 2 defenders go with him. Jaden Daniels hands off, but a defender's got to stay backside in case he keeps it. So now you take 3 defenders out of the play. There's your gap. He runs through a defensive back, gets 6 yards on 4th and 1. That's part of the versatility of the run game as well, and the attention that others will get in certain situations that I think helps.
All right, let's talk about the passing game for a minute. I still think it's way too early to make judgments about Terry McLaurin and his role in the offense, but the numbers are the numbers, and they're not very good. And while he did get targeted a lot, they haven't found a way to unlock him in the offense. So 2 weeks in, where are you on his role and what kind of output he could have in this particular offense?
I think we kind of are there almost always early in his season with him, right? And because it seems like every year it's why aren't they getting the ball more to McLaurin? Except for his first year, we had a couple really big games early. And so I do believe it'll come, because I felt like they had a good he and Daniels had a good connection this summer. And, last week the Giants tried to take him out. The reason why they only scored 21 points wasn't because they weren't getting the ball to McLaurin, it's because they couldn't convert in the red zone. If you convert 2 times in the red zone, now you have 25, 29 points or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Just 2 conversions to the red zone and touchdowns. Now the game looks different, and we're not sitting there, because I think with the week before, it's a bigger thing with Tampa Bay, but there were a couple missed opportunities with him there. So I think those opportunities were there, and I feel pretty confident that they will get on that same page. There was a deep ball that was missed. There was the slot fade where in the future, I think that becomes a back shoulder, because that's what was there. The way the defensive back plays, that's just a matter of reading it. And they've done it on the practice field. That's why I feel confident it will get there. So I also think with McLaurin, he's a very tough guy. And they were doing a lot. And we may see this tomorrow, or Monday. some of the short swing passes, et cetera, the receiver screens, because he can break a tackle. You block that, you may get 8 yards. He's capable. That's where they were using him last week a lot, because the Giants over the top were certainly protecting that. So, I do think it'll get there, because again, we saw it this summer. We saw it with Ertz, we saw it with Eckler, we saw it with McLaurin as well.
So one more on the offense. So your colleague Dan Graziano goes on the air on ESPN, lists Washington as a team that could be a candidate to try to acquire a relevant receiver, if not a big-time one. How much are you buying into that Adam Peters and company that haven't done anything like this so far at all, whether it's free agency or all the Ayuk rumors, right? They haven't done anything like this. That's a possibility over the next month or two.
I think everybody knows that this team needs another receiver, so I think there's going to be a lot of speculation.
And that's it, period.
Nobody is, and even Dan didn't report like, hey, they've been calling teams and been aggressive. If somebody's saying that, that's different. Saying that they'd like to add one, well, sure.
Duh. They need a corner too.
Yeah, they don't.
Got one of those.
So what I know is that they know Brandon Ayuk very well. They really weren't in the game for him. They talked to them before the draft. That really was about it. There was never anything beyond that. And so, the idea, so logically, let's look at this. Are they really going to give up a high pick for a receiver at the deadline? Knowing that pick could be a top 12 pick, possibly, depending what their record is. But if you're 7-1 at that point, and hey, this pick's going to be in the low 20s, that's different. But it's still there's so many surrounding factors with this: cost, money, draft picks. This team wants to keep its draft picks. Now, if some team comes and said, "Listen, we'll get rid of this guy for a 3rd round pick," that's different. But if we're talking high picks, I think I'd want something more than they're a team that would be interested in that, because we know that. Are they a team that's aggressively seeking that? That's a different conversation.
All right, other side of the ball, the other big storyline is where's John and Duran been through a couple of games? And I would go back and say, rewatch Tampa. They could have had 5 sacks. Each of them could have had 1. They just didn't finish plays, and they won at the point of attack. Last week was different. The Giants also utilized very different protective lineups, double-teamed them a lot, chipped them a lot. Not trying to make excuses for them, but their presence is not there. And obviously, in the same way with McLaurin, how are they going to have long-term success if their quote-unquote best players aren't making impact plays? So what do you think about John and Duran?
Yeah, and last week they were double-teamed a ton. I mean, a lot. And, in the pass game and the run game. That's fine. Now, having said that, they are being paid a lot of money to make plays. Aaron Donald, Chris Jones. You don't think Chris Jones is going to get double teamed? Now, can you move them around a little bit more and create situations? They moved them around a little bit, for sure. There were times they're lining up over the tackle, slanting inside. There were times where I felt like they had their best success against the run was when they were slanting the defensive line, creating some movement for them to help get off those double teams and away from those double teams. And then if there are double teams, somebody else mathematically should be able to come in, right, and make a stop. So if they're taking on double teams, somebody else has got to come in and make a play. And that's what also isn't happening. But what I think, Bram, what I wasn't used to seeing is double team, guy gets off, now he's moving you more out of your gap. That's what I think was a little bit concerning. And then in the fourth quarter, I felt like there were times where, and it's funny because I mentioned this and someone's like, well, they only had the ball for 22 minutes. I felt like they were getting a little bit gassed in the fourth. And part of that, I think, was taking on double team after double team after double team and then just standing up too much. Both of them, I think, were doing that. So I think that was something to watch well. How did the Bengals handle that? There are times where I'm watching them, the guards are in one-on-one situations. They're not using as many 7-man protections as the Giants did or 6-man protections. So I think that will help. But I also think it's incumbent on them. First of all, they've got to win their one-on-ones consistently because they are the guys that are making the money. And that's why they made the money. So there's that, and then there's also other guys have to help create situations, whether it's schematically or whether it's ends winning more to help, force the double teams to go elsewhere. Or sometimes it's the linebackers or safety attacking the double team more into a gap. And that also has to happen too. But Wagner and Luvu, I think, are playing well, so I don't blame them for that. But I do think there are times where those double teams are staying on them a little bit too long. And they do have to play it better because when you're, again, it is a fact that they're getting double teamed a lot, but it's also true that of the elite defensive tackles are going to win those on occasion.
Yeah, and Washington put not nearly enough pressure on Daniel Jones, who
Correct.
skewered them, and I know that that's just bane of our existence, that it's Daniel Jones doing it because he beats no one but Washington and almost did it again. In this case, and I hate making this comparison because I don't think they're comparable, but I do think there is a similarity between Jones and Burrow this week in that they both are actually very comfortable in the 5 to 7 step drops, and they want to throw from there. And if you pressure them, they'll do very different things, which I think is what separates them. Jones, I think, gets rattled, for lack of a better term. He'll slide into the wrong pressure on the wrong side. He'll throw incompletions or interceptions or worse. Burrow won't. Burrow actually will step into the pocket. You'll hear coaches talk about how this showcases his toughness, how much respect they have, because he will take a beating, and he's got the injuries to show for it by doing this. But this is where, potentially, if they play this right, this plays into their strength. John and Duran play better, whatever it is. Burrow's going to step into them. Like, he's going to step into the pocket. If you bring pressure around the edge, it won't be like Jones who's going to try to escape and run. Burrow will step in to try to make a throw. And this is where John and Duran, if they win, could have those impact moments this week that I think people are looking for.
Could have. Now, the question is, because against Tampa Bay, too often, like while they were applying pressure, the pocket was not tight. And with Baker Mayfield, you have to keep it tight because he's going to do exactly what he did. That would be my concern with Burrow is if that pocket isn't tight, he's going to escape. Now you got Jamar Chase. You have a couple other guys.
Higgins is back.
T. Higgins, especially if he plays, and I'm assuming it was tape, but he's going to play. So that becomes another problem. And then the tight end, Gesicki, is really good. So you have guys that if you don't play that right, and that's what we saw 2 weeks ago, applied pressure, Baker makes big plays. If that happens again, it's going to be a similar type game. And the only question is, can this offense go toe-to-toe with them at this point? Because you can't let them extend plays because it'll kill them.
So this is a showcase game. Let me end where we started, which is what can they show you on Monday Night Football? Like, win or lose, what do you want to see from them to see again that there's another step of going in the right direction?
Well, I think for the offense, it's converting more points. Like first game, 20 points, had a chance for at least 26 because of field goals and possibly more with one big completion, right? So possibly up to 30 points if you complete the one to Terry and then Cade York makes his field goals. That was available to them, right? And a couple other plays. Then last week is 21 points, but more was available because of the red zone issues. Do they convert more of those? Is this an offense that's growing? Are they going to keep limiting themselves because of mistakes they made or plays that they don't convert? So I want to see that, right? And is the run game becoming a consistent force for them? That's also going to be a fact. That's also something to watch. Defensively, you want to see more gaps being filled. You don't want to see the big, can they force the Bengals to be very patient driving down the field? If Jamar Chase gets 8 catches for 80 yards, I think that's a good night for them because it means he's not breaking tackles and getting more.
That's actually the numbers he's posted so far.
Correct.
So far through 2 games, he's getting under 10 yards per
Correct.
catch. They haven't unleashed him yet.
And part of that is you watch defenses, the way they're playing them, they're taking him away down the field. Teams can do that pretty easily to one guy.
Yeah, to Mel Kiper's disdain.
Right, but you got T. Higgins coming back now. Yeah. Can you still do it? And also Gesicki is really tough. So if you can tackle him and limit him, do you become better in those areas? It's and this is like, I know fans are just so tired of having to be patient, and I don't blame them. But this group just got here, so is there progress defensively? And I think it's kind of like, well, we'll know when we see it because are you giving up those big plays? Are you tackling more consistently? Are the gaps more narrow in the run game? So I think there are ways to measure that, win or lose.
Yeah, the surprise for me this year is the offense is ahead of the defense, and that's the surprise to me.
Me too. I thought, especially with the rookie quarterback, new play caller, all that. But I do think that there's things that they are still learning about defensively. Joe Witt's a first-time coordinator, and not to make excuses, they can be better. I also wonder, I think the philosophy that teams have in the summer hurts teams that are new together. Yeah. And I think I don't necessarily think it's the best way to prepare. Now, it may be the best way for 17 games to prepare and make sure you're healthy.
What do you mean by that?
Well, so in other words,
you're not hitting, not tackling, all that stuff,
and not playing more in the preseason. So you're saving bodies for 17.
I raised this early, and I said I don't know, they're not practicing football, and
right.
And they're saying we're going to be physical and we're going to be this and we're going to be that.
And that's what I'm saying. So short term, long term, you may protect the bodies and keep them fresh. Short term, you're going through this, and I think that's where you have to. But this is the trend in the NFL. Yeah.
All right, John. See you in Cincinnati.
All right, thanks.
Up next, a preview of the Bengals with their play-by-play voice, Dan Hoard. This is the Bram Show on ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.
When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the Vehicle Owner's Manual for important feature limitations and information.
Overnight, Dunkin's Pumpkin Spice Coffee has sent folks into a cozy craze. I'm Lauren LaTulip reporting live from home in my hand-knit turtleneck that my Nana made me. Cinnamony.
The home with Dunkin' is where you want to be.
Let's welcome in the play-by-play voice of the Cincinnati Bengals as we get set for Monday Night Football. It's Washington and Cincinnati. Hey, Dan Hoard. How are you, Dan?
Bram, I'm awesome. How are you?
I'm good. All right, let me start with the big picture question for all of us, which is, what a terrible setup for Washington. 0-2 team, Joe Burrow's the quarterback, been in the playoffs. I'm sure they're screaming seasons on the line. What's the week like there in Cincinnati?
All of that is true, and you forgot the fact that the Bengals will induct a new class of Ring of Honor players on Monday night, so that will ratchet up the excitement level even more. Corey Dillon and Tim Krumrie going into the Ring of Honor. So, yeah, their backs are against the wall. Third year in a row they've started 0-2. 2 years ago, they climbed out of that hole and made it to the AFC Championship game and won the AFC North. Last year, they finished with a winning record after starting 0-2, but they didn't have Joe Burrow for the final 7 games of the year, so they might have made it back to the playoffs and had a playoff run if he had been able to play the rest of the year. So it's familiar territory, but you're right. The Commanders will be facing a team that looks at it as seasons on the line on Monday night.
This is, you wouldn't know this, but like this is every year that a team makes us homecoming. Like every single year, the Ring of Honor or the honor game is Washington. So like this will be familiar for us. All right, let me go back to the 0-2 starts. Why does that, or why do you think that's consistently happened over the last few years?
I can tell you why it happened the previous 2 years. Joe Burrow wasn't Joe Burrow. 2 years ago, he had an appendectomy the day before training camp started. In the season opener against the Steelers, he threw 4 interceptions, which he will never do again for the rest of his life. Last year, he strained his calf on the second day of training camp. Missed camp, was terrible the first 4 weeks of the season, and that made it really easy to explain why they started slowly. This year, it was a different story. Joe made it through training camp, even though he's coming back from wrist surgery. They pushed the guys harder than they have the previous 2 camps. They had multiple joint practices with other teams. Didn't play the guys a lot in the preseason, which seems to be kind of a bugaboo here in Cincinnati. But I thought they were battle-tested more going into the season than they had been, and they still laid a pterodactyl-sized egg in week 1 against the Patriots. So I wish there were simple solutions. It seems to change a little bit every year, but the bottom line is, for whatever reason, they just cannot get off to a good start.
Okay, and I assume because they've had success in the past, because Burrow, well, let me start here. Is Joe Burrow healthy now? There's a lot of questions about his wrist. Do you believe that he's 100% healthy?
100% no, but close and getting closer every day. You know, he's been asked multiple times, are you 100%? And he never says yes. But he always says, I'm fine, I'm getting better, it's going to be great. So he looked really good last week against Kansas City. I thought he had a solid training camp. I don't think the wrist is a problem. So when I say it's not 100%, I don't want that to send off alarms.
Yeah.
I do think he's close, but I just think that's natural. He hadn't played since the beginning of November last year. He had a serious wrist surgery. But he's throwing the ball fine. I think it feels better all the time. I don't think it's going to be a concern going forward.
Okay. So we have ready-made reasons why they were 0-2 the previous 2 years. This year seems a little different. You don't anticipate any kind of issues there where there's a lack of confidence that they're going to come back from this Do you? Or is this locker room different than it's been the last couple of years?
Different, but not necessarily bad. It's always different from year to year because the personnel changes. I think they will come back from this, and I say that largely based on how they played last week at Kansas City. They outplayed the Chiefs. They should have won the game. You need a stop on 4th and 16 with 40 seconds to go. If you get it, you win the game. Unfortunately, a rookie 7th-round safety commits pass interference that allows the Chiefs to extend the drive and pull out the game on a walk-off field goal by Harrison Butker. But they played really well last week. I said after the game, that's who we thought they were, resurrecting that old NFL quote. So I do think they're going to be one of the better teams in the AFC, and I think they took a big step in that direction last week.
What is their run game now post Joe Mixon? What does that look like?
It's never going to be a major focus of this offense. It's a passing team, and it should be. You've got Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. I think they'll have T. Higgins on Monday night. The tight ends had 14 catches for 151 yards last week. So when you've got Joe Burrow, you're not going to run it 60% of the time. They're looking for an efficient running game. When they do run, they want to average 4.5 yards a carry. They're splitting up the carries between a veteran, Zach Moss, and a second-year player, Chase Brown, who's really, really fast. So I think they feel pretty good about what they're looking to get out of the running game, but they're not going to have a guy back there like Joe Mixon where you can expect in some games for him to get 25 carries.
Okay, here's another broad question, but I'm sure you get it a lot, which is negotiations did not go the way that a couple of prominent players wanted this year, specifically Jamar Chase, and I think to a lesser degree T. Higgins, because he seemed to have agreed to his franchise tag in the summer, even though he was trying to get a new contract. Do you think that has anything to do with the slow start for the team this year?
Not really. Let me talk about each guy individually. So T. Higgins has missed the first 2 games with a hamstring injury. It's driving me crazy that I've seen speculation around the country that he's faking it because he didn't get a contract extension. Nothing could be further from the truth. For starters, for T to get the kind of contract that he wants to get going forward, he needs to play.
Yeah.
He missed 5 games last year with injuries, so he has plenty of incentive to get on the field. But furthermore, he's a tremendous guy, and I'm not worried about that at all. As for Jamar, he might have been a little distracted in week 1 because the negotiations went down to game day. They were really close to getting it over the finish line, couldn't quite get there because of the structure of the contract. The Bengals were willing to offer him Justin Jefferson money, but they didn't quite get there. The thing with Jamar is I think going into the year, the expectation was he would get huge contract that would make him one of the highest paid players in the league next year, just like Justin Jefferson. He's got 2 years left on his deal this year and the option year that they've already picked up for next year. So Jefferson got his payday after year 4. I think most people kind of thought, at least several months ago, that Chase would get his deal after year 4. But then some of the receivers in his draft class got deals early, so they tried to move things up and get it done with him early. It didn't quite happen. I do think he's going to play, many, many more years here in Cincinnati, but it's just unfortunate they couldn't quite get there this year. But I think both sides have tabled it. Jamar, says he'll bet on himself. He's going to put up big numbers and be the highest paid receiver in the league beginning next year in all likelihood.
Okay. Let me just ask one more question about the offense. The offensive coordinator is now the head coach in Tennessee, so it's a different coordinator there. What tangible changes, if any, have you seen in how they approach their offensive game plan through a couple of games?
I think the biggest thing was something I alluded to a little earlier, the play of the tight ends last week. Not only did they have 14 catches for 151 yards between 3 guys, but they were on the field in 2 tight end and 3 tight end sets, much more than we've seen in Cincinnati in recent years. The Bengals have historically been at the top or near the top of teams that line up in 12 personnel, 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers.
Yeah.
Last week, it was about 30% of the time they had multiple tight ends on the field. The week before, I think it was 29 against the Patriots. So I think that might be the next evolution of the Bengals offense. They're still going to have 3 receivers on the field most of the time, but I do think they're trying to diversify more. give opposing defenses more things to prepare for and worry about. And last week, it was effective use of the tight ends.
And maybe, a reaction to not having Higgins potentially as well?
That was part of it. Yep, that was part of it. And also the way the teams are trying to take away Jamar. Jamar was double and triple teamed from the moment he stepped off the bus in Kansas City last week. So if the opposing defense is going to be hell-bent on not allowing him to get deep and not allowing him to individually beat them, which he has done against some teams in the past, then one of the ways that you can counter is by incorporating your tight ends more. The Bengals have added players to that room, including a fourth-round draft pick, Eric All, who looks like a star in the making. He only lasted until the fourth round because he tore his ACL and missed most of last year in college and hurt his back and missed most of the previous year. So he's healthy now. He looks like a stud, and I think the Bengals are really excited about his future.
In what you're saying about how they've kind of approached their game plan the first couple of weeks, I don't know, at the point of us taping this, I don't know how much you've watched of Washington yet, but Malik Neighbors had 18 targets, 10 catches, 125 yards, and a touchdown. And the week before, Mike Evans had 2 touchdowns. Chris Godwin had 1. Baker Mayfield, must have, I think it was 75, 80% of his throws he hit. So I got a funny feeling that Jamar Chase is going to be active this week.
Well, if the Commanders are not specifically determined to try to prevent Jamar Chase from having one of those games, then he will have one of those games. Because if there are opportunities there, the Bengals will find him every way they can to get the ball.
Okay, other side of the ball, take me through the defense here through the first couple of weeks. What are you seeing with the Bengals so far?
Well, the good thing is they're not giving up a lot of points. So they gave up 16 in week 1 to New England and lost, unfortunately, 16-10. The defense only gave up 19 to Kansas City last week, but the Chiefs scored a defensive touchdown in order to win the game. So defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo often says to reporters, don't ask me about yards, don't ask me about time of possession, ask me about points. My job is to prevent the other team from scoring a lot of points. And so far, 2 teams have failed to score 20 points against Cincinnati. The biggest weakness of the Bengals defense last year and this year so far has been stopping the run. So when I see those Washington numbers from last week's game on the ground, that is obviously a concern. And the Bengals have injury problems on their defensive line right now. Before the season began, they drafted 2 defensive tackles high this year to try to beef up that part of the team. Neither guy has played yet. Chris Jenkins, their second-round pick out of Michigan, broke his thumb. McKinley Jackson, third-round pick, big 330-pound, interior guy out of Mississippi State, suffered a knee injury early in camp. Haven't seen either of those guys in a regular season game yet. And then last week against Kansas City, their starting defensive tackles went down, B.J. Hill and Sheldon Rankins. Not sure about their status for this week. So they just added veteran Lawrence Guy, who was out on the street to try to beef things up inside. They've got a couple of guys that played pretty well against Kansas City, but it's definitely a concern going into this game.
Yeah, last week, the Washington had 200 yards on the ground. The week before, they ran the ball effectively. Some of it was scrambles from Jaden Daniels. I think, not unlike what you're talking about with Burrow and the offense, you'd be surprised to hear how prominent the tight end was being used in your offense. I don't think people look at Washington and think Cliff Kingsbury and they're going to be a power run offense. But that's what they've kind of morphed into like the last couple of weeks. And Brian Robinson had a showcase game a week ago. So I expect more of that Monday night. 1, to keep Burrow off the field for as much as possible. And 2, because I actually think it's their best attribute early in the season this year.
Well, as I said, Bram, stopping the run has been the Bengals' weakness now for a couple of years. I think they were next to last in the NFL last year, and they gave up $170 in week 1 this year to New England. It was a little bit better last week against Kansas City, but an opposing team would be idiotic to not try to win that way against Cincinnati. So I'm sure that will be a major focus for Washington on Monday night.
Okay. Last thing, just give me a big picture question. So you got Cincinnati's overcome 0-2 starts. It's not going to make them feel as if the season is lost in any way. We've seen that before with them. Obviously, you have extraordinary talent, especially on the offensive side of the ball. How is everyone feeling around there about their open window for a championship right now? as the state of the team and where it is and some of the changes that have occurred over the last couple of years?
I think people understand the financial reality of Joe Burrow now being in his second contract as opposed to his rookie contract. He is making $55 million a year, and the salary cap ramifications really kick in heavily next year. So people understand that it's going to be impossible to keep everybody. We talked about T. Higgins. The Bengals have looked at it, I think, as, all right, we've got to keep Jamar Chase. He's going to make a lot of money. Is it really feasible to give two wide receivers top of the league money when you've got defensive players and great defensive players like Trey Hendrickson and others that you want to keep? So people understand all of that. But Joe Burrow famously was asked about his window a year or two ago, and he said, the window is my entire career. So I think that is the overall feeling in Cincinnati. As long as the Bengals have that guy, it almost doesn't matter who they put around him. They're going to be in the hunt. And I believe that. I do think Joe Burrow will win at least a Super Bowl at some point during his career in Cincinnati. But it's probably fair to say it's going to have to be done with some younger players, younger, cheaper players going forward.
We're hoping we're going to say that about our Heisman-winning LSU quarterback as well one day. 2 games, and we'll see. Dan Hoard is the play-by-play voice of the Cincinnati Bengals. I'll see you on Monday night at the stadium. Thanks so much for coming on, Dan.
Bram, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Keys to the game tonight next. Bram Watch the Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. Welcome back, Bram Watch the Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right, let's weigh in one more time on Terry McLaurin, who did speak to the media on Friday off of a slow start to his season this year as Washington, has performed, I think, admirably is not even the right word for it. They've executed on offense very well, all things considered. New play caller, new group, young rookie quarterback. The whole thing is very different, and yet they scored on every true drive that they had, albeit all field goals, and so we can parse out the red zone issues that occurred a week ago. But they've scored on every drive that they had. They could easily have scored close to 30 points in either one of the games, cash in on any of the red zone opportunities. They score over 30 against New York, make the 2 field goals that they had against Tampa Bay, and they're right on the cusp of scoring again 30 points. But ifs and buts and whatever. Still, at the same time, there is a lot of room for improvement. In week 1, there wasn't much of an intermediate passing game. That seemed to have changed by week 2. The running game was really cooking in week 2, not just using Daniel's legs, but Brian Robinson, who had a career-high 133 yards on the ground. The team altogether rushed for over 200 against the Giants. It is a strength here walking into tonight because Cincinnati is one of the league's worst rush defenses. They're giving up over 160 yards per game through 2 weeks to New England and Kansas City. And so you would think they would lean back in on some of that. But Terry McLaurin has gotten kind of lost in the shuffle so far. It's just a couple of games, but lost in the shuffle. He only has not even 40 yards receiving in 2 games. After 8 targets last week, he is the most targeted receiver on the team, but they just haven't unlocked him here. And I think the really striking number is the yards per catch, which is under 5 yards per catch. So the plays they are making with him are at or behind the line of scrimmage, and they're trying to run some kind of screen routes in general, and they're really just not going anywhere. So they haven't been able to throw to him in short yardage and have him make some big plays. And at the secondarily, when they've tried the deep shots, and it only happened a couple times in the first game against Tampa, they were just not made connections. So finding a way to get to McLaurin is going to be a key. And earlier this week, when Cliff Kingsbury had his media availability, he, unprompted, without, basically said, I need to do a better job with McLaurin. It's on me to unlock him. He's one of the best players in the league, certainly one of the best receivers on the team, and it's incumbent on me schematically to figure out how to do that, and we'll have to see if that gets unlocked tonight. McLaurin did speak to the media the other day on Friday, the small group that did show up, and here's what he said about basically his role, patience, and trying to figure out where he fits in terms of having an impact on the games.
In a new offense, whether it's you or any playmaker, is it hard to be patient to wait for things to kind of come around so that everybody gets their opportunities to make the plays?
Yeah, I mean, there's only one football that could go around, obviously, and, we got to a number of playmakers who have made plays not only here but other places, and I think all guys want to make plays to help this team win. And I think it sometimes takes time, obviously, when you have a new offense and a rookie quarterback, to just kind of get in the flow of things. But I think Jaden's done a great job of handling everything that we've been giving him and taking care of the football, most importantly. And so, I think we're looking forward to the opportunities to continue to push the ball down the field, and he's getting more comfortable back there. And so guys just have to be ready for the opportunities. You never really know what's going to come. Like, with a game on the line, Noah probably didn't think he was going to be one-on-one and have the chance to get us down there. He didn't think that he was going to have to make that dive and catch. So you never know when your play is going to come up, but it's a matter of being ready when your number is called. And so I think we got an unselfish group, but also a competitive and hungry group because we got so many guys that want to make plays. So at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that we're playing hard without the ball as well, and just being happy for the guys who are making plays, because it's going to take more than just one guy for us to have success. If you have multiple weapons on the offense that teams have to account for, it opens it up for more opportunities for everybody to go around.
So now that there's a big awareness, obviously, I would expect McLaurin to be targeted more and Kingsbury to be trying to figure out a way to get him more involved. Still, on the game tonight, the strength of Washington's offense right now is running the ball with Robinson, Eckler, and Daniels, but really the lead backs. And it was really profound what they were able to do inside the tackles. And this is where Cincinnati has been really weak. And really the strength of the Cincinnati defense so far has been on the edge with their terrific rush end, Trey Hendrickson, who's off to just a tremendous start this season. He's going to have to be someone that they deal with, whether it's Cornelius Lucas or Brandon Coleman playing at left tackle. In all likelihood, probably both of them see reps once again. Other side of the ball, I think we're looking for the reawakening of John Allen and Daron Payne this evening. Here's what I've noticed about Joe Burrow, and this is something that gets a lot of credit from the other coaches. When I talked to Dan Quinn the other day, he talks about, how tough Burrow is. He will stay in there. He will take shots. He's got the injuries through his career to show for this, but Burrow will step up into the pocket, will stay to the last moment, and will throw the ball at the last possible second. And so he's earned a lot of the respect, but here early in the season, what he will do, this is unlike kind of with the quarterbacks that they've seen so far, he will step into it. So if you can bring some added pressure around the edge, and you can kind of get him to feel that heat, he will step into the pocket. And this is where John and Daron have to win. If they are able to win their matchups on the interior line, they're going to have the opportunity to make some plays. And if they end up making some plays, that'll probably quiet some of the criticism. A week ago, they were double team chip blocked. The Giants were using a lot of 6 and 7 man kind of front protection formations. It's very difficult to make any plays. Doesn't change the fact that Daniel Jones obviously had way too much time last week and was able to have a big day with Malik Neighbors. And if that gets repeated here with Burrow, Chase, and assuming Higgins is starting tonight, Washington's defense is going to be tested and probably broken at times. So it's incumbent on them to get this pressure, to get Burrow to step up, and hopefully Allen and Payne make some plays. And let's see if Washington's got another Monday night surprise in them in the first high-profile game for Dan Quinn, Adam Peters, Jaden Daniels, etc., etc. All right, we'll talk to you tomorrow with a full recap. Bram wants to show ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.